The way it began was with a tip that Superintendent Jean Harris had met with her principals over something contentious and that the meeting didn't go well.
We were fortunate to have sources who had at one time worked inside the district's data center that was responsible for collecting school data and analyzing it. They met with us actually at a Panera Bread here near Columbus, much like this one, and told us basically how it had been done for many, many years. And that really, sent us down a path of trying to discover exactly what had been manipulated and by whom and why.
The first story kind of brought more people out of the woodwork. They read that story and said, these people don't know the whole story. And we met at this Panera Bread, and they told us a story of which we left there going, wow, what these people are describing is nothing short of a mass conspiracy that's been going on for years to alter student records, sometimes hundreds of thousands of student records at a time, that's being orchestrated out of the district's data processing center.
Almost everybody we spoke with, both people who are currently working inside the district and those who are retired or are former employees, say that there's a person or a few people at the top that are behind essentially the practice of withdrawing students who shouldn't be withdrawn. And they mostly named Steve Tankovich. Pretty soon after our stories began, Steve Tankovich was taken out of his job overseeing the data center and put in another job that doesn't deal with student data.
The main culprit in the whole thing, Steve Tankovich, I've worked with since like 1986 when he was a principal at Mifflin, and I always know Steve's a guy that likes to play with numbers. And he got more and more influence over the reporting of information to the state, and I would get these requests at the end of the school year for odd bits of data. Who in my school missed 10 consecutive days of absences, which, coming from principal, was perfectly reasonable. You'd maybe want to know about that. It wasn't until, and I can't remember the year, it was 2003, 4, something like that, one of the principals said he just had a meeting with Steve Tankovich, and Steve told him to withdraw everybody in his school who'd missed more than 10 consecutive unexcused absences. And I told him, no, you don't withdraw students with that information. That's unless they weren't actually at your school. And he said, well, that's what Steve told me to do. And that was your aha moment, like, oh no, that's completely wrong. And that was one of the middle school principals, but I really don't remember which one it was. Like I said, it's been a while. So after that, I kept a pretty close eye on these kind of requests coming through. And that was really, I mean, at a low level, we knew that if there was a number that could be fiddled, Steve liked to fiddle with it. I mean, he's just that kind of guy. I mean, he was just very, very careful. He could teach some good operative techniques to the CIA.
3 days after the story ran, based on the 4 employees from the data center, the state auditor's office announced that they were going to enter this investigation. Before that, it was only the Department of Education. And to have the state auditor come into this investigation was a huge development, because the state auditor, unlike the Department of Education, actually has a whole bunch of what are similar to police powers to compel testimony, to subpoena documents. So that would be like the difference between the dog catcher and the SWAT team coming in to investigate something. These guys really raised it to another level.
Well, we clearly have found in the case of Columbus Public Schools that they're scrubbing, and our definition that we're using of scrubbing is to change attendance records without a proper conforming legal purpose to do that. Look, when we talk about illegal, there's different kinds of illegality, and I don't mean to split hairs like a lawyer, but there are things that don't comply with the law, which you could call illegal, but they don't necessarily have a penalty. They're not criminal. They just don't follow the rules. Then there's things that are improper. In other words, it wasn't just we didn't quite do it right, but we did it wrong. Okay, and then finally there's criminal wrongdoing, where you intentionally did an act that is prohibited by law. And all 3 of those categories could end up being at play here.
The district, in it initially react like one would expect when accusations of wrongdoing come up within your own organization. The Board of Education started holding meetings, but they held them in secret. They held a series of 7 secret meetings. They hired a private attorney.
But I'm going to ask the district's lawyer to come and talk about that just a little bit more.
No one has really been told exactly what this person is doing. We've had to kind of figure it out along the way, although he's been paid at this point more than $300,000.
Thank you, Dr. Harris.
And then had to pay another $100,000 to defend a lawsuit that was filed by the Columbus Dispatch over the closed meetings.
I mean, Superintendent Gene Harris said that for many months. You know, let's wait and see. We don't know what we have here, whether it's a small issue, whether it's a large issue. At some point in the fall, that stance changed a little bit, and they became what I would call increasingly defensive, in that they did start presenting those types of ideas that, you know, okay, we did withdraw students who were truant or who were absent a lot, but it was our policy, and we were told it was okay. We believed it was okay.
I want you to know this. As superintendent, I have never issued any kind of directive to make changes to student records that are not authorized.
They began a campaign, I think, to sort of convince the public that whatever was happening within Columbus City Schools was completely above board.
I did try to report it, but it would go up, you know, my immediate supervisor, yeah, she didn't have a problem with that. We need to tell somebody. And then her boss was okay, but then it always stopped at the level within the building, the CIO. I know I mentioned it a couple times to Gene Harris very diffidently. It wasn't like I was in there with a sign saying data cheating is going on, because I would have liked to kept my job. But, you know, offhand, I'd say, you know, some of the data you're getting isn't as good as it could be. And she'd say, take it up with your CIO, who at the time was Steve Tankovich, so that wasn't going to happen.
I am determined that we will fully address any shortfalls in student record keeping and/or reporting. This data is vitally important to us as a management tool, and it is vitally important that the community can trust our information.
There is always the risk that some of this is all data entry, and there's certainly the risk that things got miscoded. I mean, that frankly is one of the reasons that you go back and look at data. It's why you scrub data, and using that term the way the auditor used it when he was the auditor in Delaware County, which is to make your data better and not to manipulate it.
My takeaway from the interim report is that it confirms that districts across the state, not just Columbus, believe that it was permissible under the state guidelines to withdraw students for non-attendance, even though no truancy charges were prosecuted. The Department of Education's EMIS reporting program is extremely complex, and there has been very little oversight or monitoring provided to Ohio school districts to help us navigate all the regulations and directives.
We've now looked at a couple hundred schools around the state, multiple school districts. And we have found, typically in some urban settings, that there are some other school districts that are engaging in similar practices. But it's just a handful. The vast majority of these schools seem to be able to figure out exactly what the rules are and have turned up no problems. So if it's really a problem that the rules aren't clear, there's ambiguity, it doesn't mean what we say it means, why is it that everybody else is able to comply except this handful of urban school districts? I don't think that passes the smell test.
In the beginning, as the story was first developing, we did have some access to the superintendent in terms of being able to just ask her a question about what was happening. Over time, the access to Dr. Harris has decreased. At some point, they started issuing written statements only, and now we're to the point where she doesn't talk a lot about this, and she declines interview requests, including the one for this video.
You may imagine a principal in a building might want to go in and change some records to make their school look better. That's kind of easier to wrap your mind around than what appears to be a centrally orchestrated operation to change literally millions of records. And so many people knew about it. People in the data center, principals alleged that they knew. They were called in and trained how to do this. And records show that single people made literally tens of thousands of changes, sometimes right before the report card information was to be handed over to the state. So after the school year, they're retroactively going back and making tens of thousands of changes that literally change the report card and scores of buildings. So, and that it may have gone on for years.
In all of this, it's been a little difficult to realize that it's not just a numbers game. It's not just about administrators perhaps within the school district, tampering with numbers to make themselves look a little better, make their school look like it had improved. This actually affects people, and there are parents who believe that their children have been affected. And one of them is a man named Jonathan Beard, who questions whether his daughter might have been entitled to a school voucher. It's essentially a private school voucher to attend a private school on the state's dime.
My name's John Beard. I'm a resident of the Near East neighborhood here in Columbus, Near East side of Columbus. Our home school for high school attendance purposes is East High, right behind us. One of our challenges has been trying to find a good education here with our address. Unfortunately, the schools in the area have not been high performing. Our elementary school is a failing school, our middle school is a failing school, and our high school is a failing school as well. The data manipulation that has been going on is serious. It's impacted our family financially. We're paying out of pocket 100% rather than roughly 50% for private school education. We're tremendously upset by it. It's been a tremendous breach of confidence for the taxpayers, certainly us as residents and citizens. We try to do all the right things, and it hurts when people don't do the right thing. It hurts when the trust that you give to people is abused. It's hurt my daughter. It's hurt our family financially. As taxpayers, they came to us for levies, citing improvement. It was all a fraud. We're now finding out, not just the school performance increases were fraud, but now we're finding out graduation rates are fraud. We're finding out dropout rates were fraud. We've all been lied to, and to our detriment.